So let's go a little bit more into the colonization period. So when Pizarro came in, it was a warrior priest society also. The Spanish are a warrior priest society. So actually the top echelon is captured, and since the Incas were over the other tribes, that's what made it fairly easy for not very many people to take over, but it was devastating. About 90% of the indigenous population of South America was decimated, and so everything was changed there also. And we did go over a lot of this kind of colonial culture shock when we talked about Central America. So much of this went on here too. So let's talk about the resulting culture mix that we have here. Population-wise, which country has half the people?
Brazil.
Brazil. So by far, Brazil is the dominant country. And as far as culture mix, remaining culture mix, obviously, which of these 9 would speak which language then? Spanish. You're right. You're right. Don't be shy. It's Spanish. And Brazil would be Portuguese spoken. So obviously Spanish in these 9 countries and Portuguese influence in Brazil. However, Brazil also has a mix. We talked about how in the Spanish countries, what economic system would be in place? The hacienda system, whereas the Spanish were mining. And we'll talk more about mining and how indigenous people were often put in the mines. Even to this day, we heard about the Chilean miners that were stuck down, way down in the pit because of some malfunctioning of the elevator. And so this system was, so hacienda system here, and what system was in place then in Brazil? Plantation system. And so in Brazil, especially on the coast, many, many Africans were brought in. So roughly half of the slaves taken from West Africa were brought in here. Now we know that a lot of slaves were brought to the United States, and we talked about how a lot of slaves were brought to the Caribbean for a plantation system as well. Brazil, especially on the coast here, but we're brought in for plantation system. So again, we have this mix of, here it would be Portuguese. There would also be African, very strong African influence in Brazil. And you would still have indigenous influence too. You would have the mix. Brazilians love to be called Brazilian. They don't like to be isolated by ethnicity. So if you ask a Brazilian what they are, they'll say Brazilian. And beautiful culture mixes there. Very, very diverse. And here it would be more Spanish, Amerindian. South American indigenous people mixed with Spanish. And we remember mestizo would be, that's known as the Spanish indigenous culture mix. Okay, so more African population along this coast here. Southern region of South America is known for European people settling there. And remember, the Altiplanos have the Incan and Aymara peoples that originally lived in the Altiplanos, still live there. And there are patches of Amazonian tribal peoples still, and remember, they live very lightly. They weren't used to building concrete or wood houses. They moved around and lived off the land, and so there's still some people living like this, but not many. Many of those people, many of the tribal peoples have moved to cities and lost their cultural ways of living off the land in the forest. And remember, it's tough to live there. Anacondas and leeches and spiders and snakes and rushing waterfalls. And it's exciting, it's beautiful, it's colorful, yet it rains. We think we have rain here. In the rainforest, it really, really rains. Oh, so it would be always rainy season in the rainforest, right at the equator there. It would rain every day. It's maybe very hard rain for certain times of the day. And then finally, I think in this intro, we can talk a little bit about economy, just brush on it. So to sum it up, what kind of an economic system do we really have here again, especially on the coast? Plantation, good. And we would have, remember in Peru, we talked about the little oases there? And those are like little pockets of specialty farming, especially in Peru, right along there. What do we have in the Amazon interior? It's called shifting, cultivation, or agroforestry, right? And in the south where the Europeans are, there's a lot of European communities there. We have a lot of, what kind of farming? A lot of cattle farming and ranching, right? Okay, so that's our beginning summary for South America. Thank you.